Chair, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good. What are we doing in terms of head count?
We have a quorum.
All right. Shall we commence? Not hearing any concerns, I'll get started. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'll call this Water and Sewer Board meeting for September 10th to order. Brenda, would you take roll for us, please?
Board Member Brisky.
Present.
Board Member Freeman.
Present. I have a really hard time hearing you.
Board Member Jolie.
Present.
Board Member Mercier.
Present.
Board Member Ridley. Present. Council Member Russell. Present. Council Member Ward.
Present.
Mayor Sierra. Chair Habernick. Vice Chair Habernick. Chair Moore.
Present. Marjan, did that sound a little better? I was able to hear. Okay, good. Wonderful. Next up, item 3, just like to get a motion to approve the minutes of the August 13th board meeting.
So moved.
I second.
Wonderful. Any discussions, corrections, edits? All right, hearing none. Please vote to approve the minutes from August 13th. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
I abstain.
All right. Wonderful. Brenda, did you get that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right, motion carries. Next up is the public forum exclusive of the public hearing. Is there anyone to address the board tonight from the public, outside of the public hearing?
We do have a member from the public here, but they would like to speak during the public hearing.
Perfect. Okay. Then we will move on. We will move on to item 5, the public hearing. Bear with me. We don't do this every night, but we're now going into what's considered a quasi judicial hearing. I'd like to ask the deputy city attorney to explain the procedures to the board for this hearing.
Thank you, Chair Moore. So the Water Sewer Board serves both a legislative and quasi-judicial role. In its legislative capacity, the board is involved in advising council regarding passing laws and setting policies. However, when acting in a quasi-judicial capacity, the board applies those laws and policies to specific cases, which involves adhering to a stricter procedural requirement, kind of similar to a judge in a court of law. These proceedings are somewhat less formal than that, but you can think of them in the same manner. So we're going to have more structured rules tonight in this public hearing than our regular board meetings. As a result, we're going to be following basic standards of notice and due process, and the decisions that's reached tonight must be based on competent, substantial evidence that would be presented during this public hearing. So board members do have a duty to conduct these proceedings with impartiality like judges, and as such, the procedures that we're going to be following tonight are those that are outlined in Englewood Municipal Code section 1-10-2-7 regarding quasi-judicial hearings.
Sorry about that. Does the board have any clarifying questions for the attorney with respect to the rules of the road tonight? She'll keep us in line, but all right, we'll proceed. All right, may I have a motion and a second to open this public hearing?
I'll move.
I second.
Great. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? All right, this hearing is open. These proceedings are now called to order. Brenda, can you please confirm that all the notice requirements have been met?
Notice requirements.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, well, notice requirements for this item have been satisfied. We published the 10-day notice on the city's website on August 26, 2024.
Wonderful, thank you. We will now proceed with the hearing on this matter. Brenda, can you swear in any witnesses we have?
Okay, for those of you who would like to speak during the public meeting, can you please stand to be sworn in? Can you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
When you come forward, please state your name clearly for the record, sign in, and initiate whether you have been sworn in.
Great. All right, we will start off with staff presentation concerning the issue before the board. And then from there, we'll move to the other groups. Peter, I believe you'll take it from here.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My name is Pieter van Rijn, the Director of the Englewood Water Utility, and I have been sworn in. Okay, so we have a set of properties that are requesting variance to the existing code due to some layout questions that are actually the result of some of the code changes that have occurred over the last year, more overarching within the city's municipal code as it relates to the development. And so we have 5 properties that are affected by this right now that will be considered as part of this variance request. And so essentially what we have is what you can see on the screen here. And as part of the city's Code Next project and the updates to code, one of the new subdivision rules that is now allowed is if it's a corner lot in a residential setting, that corner lot can subdivide into 2 lots. And so that's what you see here as an example of it's a lot that sits on a corner, residential, and they want to make it into 2 and put two separate properties on 2 separate houses or units on 2 separate properties. And so what it does from a functional engineering standpoint is it creates an issue where the water line will have to cross one half of the one property and the sewer line will have to cross the other property, typically. And the reason why I say typically is because typically the way the infrastructure is laid out throughout the city, the water line is in the main street, the sewer line is in the alley. And so if you're subdividing the property, the front property would now have a sewer line that would cross the back property to get to the alley where the sewer is. And the back property, which is adjacent to the alley, would have to cross the front property to get to the water line, which is in the main street. All of this is parallel to the main street. So you can see here the example is Layton and Fox. So Layton is the street that both new subdivided parcels are facing, and Fox is typically where the water line is, and the alley is typically where the sewer line is. And so what we're looking for from a variance perspective is those properties right now, each property needs to have its own water and sewer service. But in order to accomplish that, one has to cross the other and the other has to cross the other, whether it's water or sewer. And so we need to address the code as written to ensure that there's that service provided to each property, but then also ensuring that from a long-term perspective that new subdivided property has access to that service on the other property, which is what our proposed solution here from a variance perspective is. And so I'm going to actually back up to the diagram because I think the diagram helps us most. And so what you can see, what we've done to accomplish this is in each one of these subdivided properties, what we are requiring is that there be an easement that follows, in this case, would follow Layton, that would be parallel to Layton. Typically a 15-foot easement, although that could change based on the individual development. But the point being an easement that can't be built on top of, that grants the, for lack of a better term, the alley property, the ability to run their line, their water line across the street property, and then vice versa for the sewer line. And so we think this is a pretty simple solution that solves the problem and gets to the crux of the issue that frankly wasn't foreseen at the time that the code changes were being made. But now that we've had a couple submitted, we recognize that this is just a functional layout challenge. By providing those easements, the one property will have rights to access their line on the other property and vice versa, so that everybody can get their services in accordance with the code and be able to build their new units. And so this is the kind of thing that's brought before the Water and Sewer Board as a variance request, and then ultimately, if approved, that would be something that would be ultimately delegated for approval to the city manager or delegate, which typically is the director of utilities or myself, to further approve and then execute as it relates to the development of those parcels. We have 5 of these right now. We recognize that this is probably going to occur a fair amount, given that there's this new possible way to subdivide a corner lot. And so as we move forward, we'll continue to address any individual properties that come along as variance in the short term, variance requests in the short term, and then ultimately, because we think we've looked at code, there's a couple lines, a couple sentences that need to change in code that would address this more broadly so that this becomes in alignment with that new way that corner lots can be subdivided as per the code changes. So that's essentially what we have for the variance requests tonight.
Peter, given the nature of the hearing, is it maybe worthwhile just to run through the other 4 properties briefly? I know I believe it's all the same story.
Yeah.
But just for completeness, could we just do that real quick?
Yeah, so I just put them up on the screen. It's 601 West Layton Avenue, 5095 South Galapago Street, 4295 South Pearl Street, 5071 South Fox Street, and 4500 South Delaware. Those are the 5 properties that we're evaluating tonight for variance.
And the one we looked at, just confirm for is a representative of the other cases. So there's nothing unique about the diagrams that we should be having to address.
Yeah, this is typically the issue. Now, where that ultimately that easement falls could change a little bit here and there. But the granting of the variance is to allow the one property, the easement across the other property so that they can connect their water and sewer. And so there might be little nuanced specifics that are different, but in terms of a typical request here, what we're requesting is the ability to allow this crossing with an easement as required to grant access to each of the properties.
Let me ask the board if they have any questions for staff.
Can we actually see a picture of all of them? And do you have a pointer on your little thing so you can actually show us on the diagram?
I believe so. Yes, I do. Pictures, we will, we'll work at pulling that up. And so, yes, so I have a pointer, and I'm happy to point out any questions you have.
Can you show us on the line where each,
Okay, so in this property, so you can see that this is a corner property. This is the alley, and this is the Fox, or, I mean, sorry, this is the Fox. This is the street, also known as Fox Street. So, and then this is Layton Avenue, which is perpendicular to those two. So this is where the water line is typically installed, and this is where the sewer line is typically installed. And in this instance, we go over here, and you can see when we subdivide this to two properties here, to get the sewer from this property to this alley sewer line, it has to cross over this new property. And so this is where we're suggesting the easement go for that sewer line, and vice versa with the water line coming back across this way to the water line. And again, here's the easement for this property to send their water line across.
so will there be 4 lines running through each of those? Does the water line come into the property at the same area where the sewer line exits?
There'll be a point where they cross, but typically there's grade separation of those. The sewer line's typically lower, and we would require the sewer line to be below the water line. That's how the rules are in terms of separation of grade separation for water and sewer lines. They can cross at perpendiculars, which is what we would be looking to do here. And I believe the code on that is 18 inches at a minimum. And if I'm incorrect on that, I'm seeing a lot of head nods, yes. And so that 18-inch crossing separation is what's allowed for water and sewer.
Will there be any other utilities required in these properties other than just water and sewer?
So without understanding the scope of the entire property, so I'm just thinking about a typical property is typically there's a gas connection and there's an electrical connection. And depending on how the electric is installed or where the gas line is installed, there could be the same kind of situation.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have for right now.
I have a follow-up question. The code changes, do they require the orientation of these split properties as posted, or can they be either way?
I'm gonna look to see if I can get some help with that one. Okay, so we need to swear, okay, so Cliff Stevens, who works in the utilities department, who's leading this from a development review perspective, is going to join to answer. So, but first we have to swear him in.
Okay, will everyone wishing to speak on this item, please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. When you come forward, please state your name clearly for the record, sign in, and indicate whether you've been sworn in.
Can you use the microphone?
Yep, we gotta. I'm gonna have a. Hit the green button.
I am Cliff Stevens, Engineering Supervisor with Englewood Utilities, and I have been sworn. So yeah, there's no specific way that they need to be oriented, but there is a minimum width on these that could dictate which way they would have to be oriented.
On any of the listed properties we're reviewing, does the minimum width play into forcing it into this orientation where there's an easement needed, or can they all be the opposite way so they maintain frontage to both the alley and the street?
I believe that the minimum width is forcing which way these things are oriented, at least on some of these. I'm not sure about if it's on all of them.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify, so are you, let me see if I'm getting your question right. So instead of the subdivision line being perpendicular to Layton, you're saying is this if the subdivision line is perpendicular to Fox?
Correct.
So in those situations, I would anticipate this is not necessary because you'd have the ability to run the front to the water and the back to the sewer. It's really where it now is a perpendicular subdivision that forces the crossing.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering if that was feasible or if this was just the design that we were given without the alternative layout considered.
Yeah, no, I think it applies to when it's this layout. And keep in mind, there are some unique properties in Englewood that may not necessarily fall into this typical application. I don't necessarily have an example, but as soon as I say this is exactly how they're all going to be, we're going to find a number of them that aren't this way. So this is typically what we're trying to address. So if we go to the macro level of what we're trying to address here, is we're just trying to make sure that one, we're maintaining individual service lines for water and sewer to the two properties. And two, in those instances where they have to cross the new adjacent property, that we're requiring a dedicated easement for that crossing.
Chair, I have a follow-up question as well.
Yeah, do that and then Marjan.
So just,
Go ahead, Steve.
just to clarify, I think you just hit on this, but the portion of the code that we're being asked to provide a variance for is the portion that prohibits crossing other properties with the lines. There's not a request for them to share lines in this case.
That's correct. We wouldn't approve sharing lines because, I mean, we've talked in the past about the challenges that we have with the shared lines that we already have. And so as a standard, that is something that we would not recommend to allow is sharing lines. The way that we allow these to subdivide and have separate lines is through this crossing of the property with the dedicated easement.
Okay. And then this diagram shows a right angle in the line. Is that a problem? I don't know that I've seen that before. Is
For the
that
sewer
common?
line?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more representative than anything. If depending on the slope and the flow rate, you could do it with a pair of 45s. And so then that creates more of a sweeping bend, or they could actually do a sweeping 90, which is a less abrupt 90-degree turn. I don't know the specific designs of this. This is more of a layout.
Okay. Thank you.
Marjan?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Peter. You actually answered one of my questions. Did you say the easement was about 15 feet?
Yeah, we are recommending typically a 15-foot easement, and that could change from property to property depending on the size of the building and where they position the building. But the reason why we say 15 feet is if we have to put a sewer line 8 feet below the grade, and someday the homeowner has to dig it up, we want to make sure there's enough room to get equipment in there and to keep it far enough off the foundation of the structure such that it doesn't compromise that structural foundation, and you can still dig a deep trench. So that's why we say 15 feet. The water lines are typically at 4 to 5 feet, so those are a little bit easier, so there might be some flexibility there, but we're recommending a typical 15-foot on this easement because we think that that's appropriate for this application.
So just to kind of visually, I get that. So you said that the water line is about 18 inches, 18, am I correct? 18 inches, or is it?
So the
18-inch
that I was referencing is if a water line crosses a sewer line. So if underground, a 3/4-inch water line service line crosses the 4-inch sewer service line, those will typically cross at a 90-degree angle. And when they cross, vertically in the ground, they have to be a minimum of 18 inches apart from each other. Yep.
Okay, so my vision is that if you're getting to these two properties, then you got 15 feet that they have to go, as you say, as like a, some sort of a 90 degrees going. So how far apart would this be? Like, they're not on top of each other, are they? So because if this, let's say, building A is trying to fix their problem, and when they're digging, would that affect in that 15 feet of easement, does the building B has to deal with the digging and possibly destroying their line?
So that's all part of what would go into the details of the easement and the detail of the actual specific construction details of the lines. The reason why we say the typical 15-foot easement is because typically a 15-foot easement is deep enough to dig down to an 8-foot deep sewer main and not compromise the buildings that are adjacent to it. And 15 feet is actually a good size to do that. Also keeping in mind that, you know, there isn't another structure on the other side of that easement, so there is also some room because you have the sidewalk and things like that there. So it's, we think this addresses it in a typical setting, realizing that there might be some unique circumstances that would be more engineering details, but we would require the basic approach, the approval of the variance being that the one property has an easement across the other property for their service line, the other property has an easement across the original one property for their service line, and then the details of how that gets constructed is part of just more the normal details of plan review and construction.
Thank you.
At this point, Peter, can you go ahead and go through the each property's picture?
Yeah. So it's showing on Zoom. Is there a way to, we're trying to get it on the screen in the room. And, oh wait. Something, okay, here we go. Okay, so. This is the first one. So this is the Leighton Ave one that we talked about. And so you can see the general building envelopes, that's the dashed line. And if I say anything is wrong here, Cliff, because you've looked at these in more detail. So this is general building envelope of the two new structures. And so this structure would go to water line here, sewer line here. This structure would go sewer line here, water line here. Next one.
We actually have a water line in Leighton, so it just be a
Oh,
sewer line on this particular-
got it. So nuance to this one that Cliff just provided me background on is that this one actually does have a water line in Leighton. So this really only is needed for the sewer line in this case. We're bringing this as a typical because we will see where we end up with going both directions. Because we don't always have the water line in that other street as well. Okay, this one, I'm having a hard time seeing. Can we?
4500.
This is 4500. So, can you lay out where this one? I'm having a hard time seeing it because it's very small.
And I have these a little mixed up.
Let me go back to that second one. That's 57 on South Fox.
Right. So if you just scroll up on this one. So so there's Stanford Avenue. You can see, and scroll down just a little bit. You can see in Delaware Street, there's the water. And if you scroll up, and in the alley is the sewer. And so when they subdivide these two properties into the one lot and the second lot, would be the same kind of situation where we'd provide that easement so that they could make sure they're accessing the water or the sewer.
Would the sewer line be on one side or the other of the properties?
Yeah, so I think the typical, again, so these are, we're going off of typicals on this. So the typical would be to align it with Stanford Avenue because that's the better access. Because if you go to the other side of this, then you have the next house. And so we want to put this as much as we can along that Stanford, so that if they do have to come in and fix something, then they can come in and it's adjacent to the road. They can get access right there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, we'll go to the next one. Yep. So this one's a little bit, this one again has a little bit of uniqueness to it, because this one actually subdivides into 5 parcels because of the way the 2 parcels are able to be subdivided. And in this instance, we have multiple situations where one line will cross the other property. Again, the request here is to allow the crossing with a dedicated easement. And so without having the specifics of, you wanna lay this one out?
And this one, this is probably an early version of this, but we really only have, where's the pointer? One water line in this. We're putting a public main down here so that each of these can connect to that public main. They all have frontage to a water line except for this lot here. And this one, we have to go out Galapagos. And this is actually a HOA-owned lot there that we would be getting essentially as a utility easement.
Would the maintenance of that stick with the HOA, or is that going to become part of this property, or would that be the utility's responsibility?
That would be on the individual lot owner.
So the maintenance of the main would be on the owner of the lot. The maintenance of the courtyard is the HOA, but the lot needs the easement from the HOA in order to access their main.
Gotcha, I wasn't sure if the HOA was trying to transfer it.
I don't believe that's the case. Next one. So if you scroll up on this one, similar, I think it's a similar type of situation. It's a little bit harder to see, but you can see the new water line going to Fox Street, the sewer line going back to the alley. So you have that pointer. So water line going to Fox from here, sewer line going to alley. So easement here, easement here.
What's the setback requirement from the alley for a structure?
All right. So I'm thinking about my own property, which is an Englewood property. So my property actually owns the center line of the alley. And then there's on either side of that alley, I believe it's 10 feet either side of that center line, which is the amount of the alley that I have to, that's technically a part of my parcel, but is dedicated to the alley. And then from there, I think you can, I don't know if it's not a very significant setback. It might be only a couple feet. Okay, we might have that. Do you want to hear it? You want to contribute some thoughts on this?
So Sarah Stone, Deputy Director of Business Solutions and Engineering for Utilities, and I've been sworn in. So the setbacks, there's a 10-foot setback from the lot or home on the sight line, or 15 feet from the edge of the internal street, whichever is greater. On the side, it's 5 feet or 3 feet minimum with 10 feet between buildings. The rear, so I'm assuming that's the alley, that is 10 feet. All buildings shall meet that project perimeter setback.
Thank you.
Marjan, you got your hand up. Are you okay waiting until we just get through all of these properties, or is it specific to this?
Well, actually, it's specific to them.
Okay.
I think they use a pointer in the room, but we don't see the pointer. So when they're referring to building, this goes over that and that, and we're just like, where is this and that? So they're kind of losing us on the screen in here, right? Do you see anything that they're pointing out to, Chair? I don't see.
No.
So
No,
that-
no, in fairness to Peter, we weren't anticipating this part, so we are a little challenged here online, but if you have,
I was hoping maybe they can refer to the building like they had in the last diagram was building A and building B, maybe at least with more clarification in their communication so we can follow them.
So,
That's what I was requesting. Thank you so much.
so
Thank
Chair,
you.
Chair, I might, maybe to help, because there is a challenge of, we're putting a green dot on the screen here and you're not seeing it online.
Right.
What I think we're getting into is the details of the engineering design of the individual properties. And if we go back to what's the request here from a variance perspective, the request is to allow the one subdivided property access across the other subdivided property to make that connection to the water line, and the same vice versa when necessary to the sewer line. The details of how that happens with each individual property is what we work out as part of the development and engineering process, and to make all that work. But right now, without this variance, the one property can't get individual service from the water line, the other property can't get the individual service from the sewer line. That's what we're trying to address here. The details of how the alignment of that line and where it's connecting exactly, that gets worked out through the development process, and that's where we go back to our code requirements for engineering and connection to water and sewer lines to ensure that we're meeting that as well. So I want to make sure we don't get into specific designing of the lots when what we're looking for from a variance request perspective from a macro level is allowing one property to cross the other one to cross the other, so that we can maintain those individual services.
To me, it's kind of a chicken and egg situation where, this board has the authority to grant variances, but it's hard to do that in bulk without understanding how the specific variance is going to play into a property.
Yeah, and that's why we in the presentation, why we tried to show it in a typical setting, because you can see even with the properties that we're talking about, there's unique circumstances to each one of them. Even with a typical on this one, there happens to be a water line in Layton. Not all of them have a water line in Layton. But what's shown here is that the right-hand property, as shown, can't get sewer service without crossing the left-hand property. And so as we go through each one of these other properties, it's some version of that with the specific details of how that happens, following code, recognizing that this is what we're trying to address from a specific code variance perspective.
And I think this example is easy to follow. It's just the other ones are a little more difficult.
All right, Peter, let's go ahead and just push through the remaining ones, and then we'll pause again for clarifying questions.
So we have one more? Okay. And again, I'm sorry to those online. I'm probably going to use a green pointer, and it's going to be hard to show that. But I'll try to describe it. This is the one we just did, yes. And so this is the one, can we zoom in on so we can see a little bit better? Yeah, a little bit more I think would be helpful. Yep, so there you go. So on this one, you can see lot 1 is the existing structure, which is on the right-hand side. Lot 2 is the left-hand side. So the existing structure would have a line that goes to the alley for the sewer that would require an easement. The new property would require an easement for the water line, which is, there's no water line in Quincy.
There is, but I'm not sure.
But I don't know that we would connect to a service to a Quincy. So again, similar situation here. Okay?
All right. So, board members, again, I think if there's, these are being presented as essentially the same issue throughout. Certainly if you have a question that maybe distinguishes one property from the next, we need to tease that out. But otherwise, staff has made the representation of these are all essentially the same issue. And again, our variance is just going to be related to crossing properties. Are there any more clarifying questions with respect to the individual properties? All right. Are there any other questions for the staff at this time before we move on to the next section of the meeting, which will be to let the applicants talk to us?
Chair, it's Cammie. I had one question, and maybe this is for our attorney. The exception to the code, is this the intent of that exception being granted in the code? Or are we using the exception to do something that it wasn't really made to do?
Victoria, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing that's a better discussion in the deliberation part, or is that just a factual thing to put out now?
Thank you for the question. I think that would be better for the deliberation part. I mean, when it comes to the underlying intent for allowing the exception to these requirements in code, that would kind of go to the legislative history and how the code requirement came to be in the first place, and we don't really have that information. I'm not sure if anyone else wants to elaborate.
Well, I can go to the code here. So the first bullet is shall be served by separate service connection directly to the nearest main without crossing adjoining premises. So that's what we're looking for the variance. The second bullet is who can grant the variance. This is the sewer side. Containing one or more structures requiring sanitary service shall have a separate service connection to the main without crossing adjoining parcels. And then the approval would be the water sewer board. So both those code excerpts are what we're talking about here, which is just the crossing of the parcel piece. Does that help? Or does that still leave it?
No, I think I'm looking for, and this may be in part of the deliberation, but the intent of the code, so we can leave that.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's definitely bring that back up later on. All right. At this point, we'll proceed to the applicant's presentation. In this case, there's technically, I believe, multiple applicants, but I believe, is there at least one wishing to present to us tonight?
Chair, it looks like we only have a public comment from what I understand. Is that correct?
Okay, thank you. Give me 1 second. All right, at this time, any member of the public who wishes to provide relevant information in favor of the application may come forward. Is this one in favor of or in opposition to?
Opposition.
Okay, I'm going to, all right, we have no one here to speak in favor of it. Now, if there's any member of the public who wishes to provide relevant information in opposition to the application, you may now come forward and be sworn in if you weren't already.
My name is Rebecca Craig.
Hit that button. Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
There we go. My name's Rebecca Kramer. My cross streets are Lafayette and Floyd. I came to the city council meeting last week, prepared to speak to this. It was removed from the agenda item between when the agenda was originally set and when the meeting occurred last week. Prior to that, when I saw these diagrams in the documents for that meeting, Englewood was set up in a very specific community plan when it was built out. That has been forgotten in the current administration. Code, law, and regulation are written the way they're written for specific reasons. There is a lot of research that goes into it, and that expands beyond the Water and Sewer Board, why these codes were written this way. I attended all of the hearings for the Code Next, and I discussed at length many of the sections of code with the individuals that were rewriting the code at the time. So when I saw this on the city council agenda, I only had to make 2 phone calls to find out that I am asking you not to approve the variances tonight because I believe it may open up the city to litigation, because you're going to give these people a false sense of hope that they can split these properties and develop them, and any money that they spend to do this, by you giving them false hope tonight, let them turn around and sue the city, because they haven't done their homework. I made 2 calls. I called the Public Utilities Commission to find out about how their rules are set on transversing properties for utilities. They defer to Xcel Energy's standards. So I made a call to the building division of Xcel Energy, and they diverted me to their standards. Did a quick search of the standards, and Xcel Energy will not allow any utilities above ground, overhead, or underground to transverse another person's property. So you may get water and sewer hooked up if you guys decide to allow these variances tonight, but when they go to get electric or natural gas, one house may have electric and the other may get natural gas. But when it comes to trying to get a variance through Xcel Energy, they're going to tell you to pound sand because they don't care. Public Utilities Commission, that's why they defer to Xcel Energy, because Xcel Energy runs it. It's just the way it is. The little light on the top of their trucks, they go where they want to. They don't care who the other individuals are. Law enforcement or whatever, they have a right in the state to do what they need to do, and they're not going to grant a variance on I talked to the building department. They're not going to grant a variance on the electric because it will have to cross and transverse overhead somebody else's property, and they're not going to allow natural gas to transverse someone else's property. It is their standards, they hold to it, and they do not provide variances to it. So if you allow these people a variance on their water and sewer lines, and they invest any money in getting these plans drawn out, permits placed, hiring anyone to design the property, and they move forward on it, and the city has not done their research to know that the other utilities are not going to be allowed a variance for these properties, then turn around, ask for your money back. But Xcel Energy is not going to give you any variances to this. And the way I've seen the diagrams tonight, most lots in Englewood, electrical comes off the alley. That's where the poles come from, unless it's a very odd setup. We have a few curvy streets and cul-de-sacs, but those are few and far between. The grid system set up in Englewood, the electricity runs off the alley, and the natural gas runs from the street. And you're not going to find any way that is feasible or economic to run natural gas and electricity around and along a street and put up extra electrical poles or transformers or any of that. So I'm asking you tonight to vote this down until there's more research done and not allow these variances to go through, because I see it as a liability for the city if you give false hopes to these individuals. I spoke to some of them at the Code Next hearings. They showed up in support of Code Next and the way Code Next was written because they wanted to split their lots. They didn't even bother to read 618 or 681 pages of the statute. I did. But I'm just asking you on behalf of the citizens of Englewood. I don't want to end up on the local news stations again. I think Sean stated that we were funny and quirky here in Englewood. It's an embarrassment to have Channel 7, Channel 4, and Channel 9 tell us how we violated our own rules when we ran the GO bond for the police department because we didn't read our own law. I don't want the embarrassment again. I've lived here 57 years. There's the current administration, they don't go far enough to make sure all the boxes are checked before they grant individuals variances on these. So that's what I have to say tonight. I was prepared to speak to city council, but they pulled it from the agenda, and I found out at 4:30 tonight this public hearing would be now. So I'm just asking you, please, do some more research. Do not vote these through tonight. If you can make a deal with Excel Energy, good luck. It's just not going to happen. So I appreciate
Thank you very much for your
consideration.
presentation. Hold for a moment. Does the board have
I'm
any
already on that
questions
hold.
for
I
the
started.
person speaking in opposition to the application?
I'm sorry. Was there a question?
Yeah, do we have, Marjan, did you, go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry, I was just, I couldn't find my arm to raise it. Do you have any kind of documents that you could present
I had
us
them.
as far as what Excel
Yeah.
is providing? Like, you're bringing out the great points, and I really appreciate that, that you're showing us this important information that was not considered in my world.
Yeah, I had
wasn't
them.
aware of it.
I had
And
them
I
print.
thank you.
I had them printed out and ready to present to council last week at the city council meeting. But when it was pulled from the agenda, I threw them on my shred pile and I shredded. You can Google it while you're sitting on your computer right now. You can go in and you can go into Excel Energy and look under the building department and you can find their standards. And then all you have to do is a quick search in the standards that they have. There's two separate sections, one for overhead utilities and one for underground utilities, and they prohibit the transferring or transversions or whatever it is, under or over another person's property. And they do not provide for variances. And they do not care, they don't care about specific individual situations.
Thank you. I'm going to check that right now.
Actually, if I may, Chair Moore. So going back to the quasi-judicial nature of this, the commission, the board members, you're all limited to the evidence that's actually presented at the hearing. You cannot do your own independent research outside of that, in making your decision this evening.
Then I would just suggest that you vote it down, do your research, and then bring it back up for vote should you find that you can support it.
Thank you for your comments. At this point, normally we would let the applicant make a counterpoint. I'm assuming we still don't have anyone on the applicant.
Chair Moore,
Yes.
I think we do. Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
And I believe we might have someone online as well in the Zoom call that might want to talk. So if
Let's
we
start with
can,
the in-person and proceed, please. Have you been sworn in?
Sign in? Sure.
State my name.
Yep.
Okay, my name's Louis Stevens. I'm one of the applicants. Also, I'm a master electrician. I've been an electrician for 26 years. And I do happen to know if the main concern is Xcel Energy.
Okay, let me pause just to
Yeah, go ahead.
follow. Were you previously sworn in?
I stood up when other people did, yeah.
So just acknowledge that for.
Oh,
for
I'm
the
sorry,
record.
yes. I've been sworn in.
Thank you.
Sure. And yes, so, in my my experience of doing lots of builds, it's a very common practice and a simple application through Excel to get either an overhead line or an underground electrical line relocated to whatever specific building you're trying to build. It happens pretty often, and it's about a 3-week process and an application that is done online. So I can't speak to gas because I don't do much with gas. I know a lot of jurisdictions are doing away with gas as it is, but on the electrical side, it's pretty much a non-issue. And that's all I had to add on to that.
Thank you. And then, I'm sorry, was there any, does the board have any questions for that particular speaker?
I have one. Just curious, in your experience, do you know for a fact that those lines were run through utility easements?
So many of them were overhead, so a lot of them were overhead, and in most of the scenarios are up there. You got the lines that go up and down the alley, but they also, like in my instance, that does go across Layton as well. And there's multiple taps, I mean, all along Layton where people have had to do something similar. Because a lot of times if you build a detached garage and your existing line's coming across that, you can't have it over your detached garage, so they just have to sway it and they take it off another line. It's an incredibly common practice.
Thank you.
Victoria, just clarification, are we staying in the proper boundaries of no new evidence? Trust is still okay?
As long as everything is presented here before the hearing is closed, before your deliberations.
Okay.
So that this
Thank
is
you.
completely appropriate.
Wonderful, thank you. Was there someone online that wished to speak?
Yes, it looks like there may be 2 people online, but I do need to swear them in.
Okay, let's go ahead and swear both of them in.
If the people online could please turn their cameras on. Will everyone wishing to speak on this item please stand and raise their right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Ike, was that you?
Yes.
That was Eric.
That was Eric?
Yes.
Okay. Ike, did you?
He shows up as Ike.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. Go ahead, Chair. When you come forward, please state your name clearly for the record, sign in, and indicate whether you've been sworn in.
And I'll be honest, I'm a little confused by the names I'm seeing. So I don't know if it's Ike or Eric, but the gentleman that just did say he's sworn, you may proceed.
Okay, yeah, this is Eric Montiel.
Thank you.
My screen name may show up as Ike. My project is the project on the corner of Bellevue and Galapago, 5095 South Galapago Street. And we applied with Xcel Energy, I don't know, about 2 months ago. They have gone through all of the design of the property, and it looks like, and they're ready to start with the construction, but we need to get all of the sewer lines put in. So everything from Xcel Energy, none of the gas lines or electric lines will cross another property. Most all of those will be going down the common driveway that you saw in the middle of the 4 units there. We have been directed by the City of Englewood to extend the city sewer line from about the fence line forward, and then every single home there will have their own sewer line going to the extended city. So I don't see Xcel as being an issue whatsoever for either electric or natural gas. And the water lines have been, none of the water lines cross another property. Sewer lines don't cross one another's property, nor does electric or natural gas.
Does the board have any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Now, did we have a second person wishing to address another applicant wishing to address us?
Robert Trujillo?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. Were you
Yes,
wanting to
this is-
speak?
This is Robert Trujillo. I'm the owner of 4295 South Pearl Street, and I
Okay.
have been sworn in.
I'm sorry, you have been sworn in? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so Eric has a great point, just to follow him, and I think Eric's probably further in this process than most of us. Now, with my property in particular, 4295 South Pearl, we are just processing a submittal for a minor subdivision. We don't have any immediate intent on construction. This is basically just a process to get the corner lot subdivided, so that we have the opportunity to build at a later date or sell at a later date. But to Eric's point, if you go into many of the areas in Denver that kind of have went down this same process, there is a process that you file paperwork requesting this information or this access for both electric and gas through Excel. And there's plenty of examples in Denver, so I don't know how big of concern Excel would be with development. And I think from what I understand, all we're looking for this evening is just the ability to have an easement run across one property to access services.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Trujillo? Okay, thank you very much. I think at this point, I just will ask the board if there's any final questions. After we do that, we will close the public hearing aspect and go into deliberations. So this is the chance to ask anything we need to be clarified before moving into deliberations. I'm not seeing anyone on. Oh, Marjan, go ahead.
I was wondering since,
Marjan, you went back on mute.
thank you, I'm sorry. I was wondering, since Mr. Ark was the individual that was ahead of everybody else in his project, I wanted to see how long did it take him to get the cooperation of the Excel? What was the process? And another question that I have, there's all these concerns and verbal experiences that everybody has. What I can't figure out is why come nobody is presenting a document that I can actually look at?
I'll take a shot at that. The board's purview is with respect to water and gas lines. The other issues have been brought in by, have been made, but they're not, the specific request of the board relates to granting a variance for water and sewer.
Chair, if I might just jump in, you said water and gas lines. I think you meant water and sewer.
Yeah, let me, since we're in a public hearing, thank you. I'll agree with that correction. The board's purview relates to the water and sewer lines crossing. The other stuff is not technically what is in front of us. It's not a decision upon which we can make. I'm trying to stay very factual. Any other questions? Okay. I believe that the time for questions is now closed. We'll proceed with comments and deliberations by the board, followed by a vote to approve with conditions, or deny the application. Can I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Awesome.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? All right, very good. The public hearing is closed. The board will now deliberate and discuss the merits of the case, the evidence presented, and any conditions or amendments that may need to be made to the application. During this discussion, no new evidence or statements will be considered or allowed. Upon completion of the board's discussion, I'll call for a vote to approve with conditions, or deny the application. With that, the floor is open for the board.
Hey, John, Ty here. So I'm in support of the variance. I think for future cases like this, I'd like to see them more individually instead of batched. I just think it makes it a little bit easier.
I think that's a very fair point, Ty. Any other comments or questions, discussion from the board?
Actually, I think there was a question that we should talk about.
Yes. Cammie, do you want to go ahead and represent your question and modify as needed?
Yep, absolutely. So my question was, yes, I think on these two slides where we have the excerpts from the code, and there are exceptions to that, what is the true intent of that exception? Do we understand why it was written such to grant a variance? Is it for residential properties in this type of situation where you're trying to subdivide a property, or was this written for a different purpose in mind?
Again, so this goes back to the 1985 version of Englewood Municipal Code as it was originally adopted. I don't have that legislative history regarding the underlying rationale for this code provision and then the ability to have such a variance. So I would encourage you all to deliberate that amongst yourselves about what the intent of that is and whether or not these application requests match what that intent of the code is.
And I'll offer my perspective on that, which is that at the end of the day, the law as written is what we have to go to. We can try to infer intent and whatnot, but it's kind of limiting to expect once things are codified, that's really what kind of governs. So for me, I look at this and say, again, this is just my personal opinion. I look at this and say the black and white words are pretty clear that the Water and Sewer Board is, part of granting a variance. It seems to be this issue. The current rules allow for the splitting of the properties, and so you can't split the properties if you don't have some process to allow water and sewer service to it. So it seems pretty clear for me personally, it seems pretty clear that this is within our, what's written there is enough to guide us in making our decision and whether or not we feel like this is what's necessary to allow the code to be utilized as it's now written.
Can I
Floor's
respond?
open. Go ahead.
This is Rita Russell, and the thing that I have trouble with is that we didn't catch this in the law before we passed Code Next. And I think that we are complicating things, and I have some issues with moving forward with this variance before we address the problems that Code Next created. And I'm also concerned that there probably were other unintended consequences of Code Next that we missed. And I agree with the one speaker that said these laws were put into being for a specific reason. And it was supposed to be probably used for a variance occasionally. But now we've created a problem where it's going to be used a lot. And I think this is something that we need to address. So anyway, I will have a very difficult time supporting this. These rules that we're using tonight are in Title 12. Code Next is in Title 16. And Code Next was approved the latest. So I do think there are some historical issues that should prohibit us from allowing the variances at this time. Thank you.
Councilmember Russell, would you mind helping me in terms of if Code Next allowed for the splitting of these properties, what do you feel is if I may ask, what is the unforeseen part here?
Well, the unforeseen part of this was it is actually against the law to put water lines over another property or sewer lines. And so that's the variance that we're granting, is the water and sewer lines will go across another property. I believe that council did not take the time that we needed to actually look into all of these consequences. And I personally believe it was passed too quickly.
I appreciate your added comments. More? Any floors open still?
Chair?
Go ahead.
First, I'd like to note that the packet tonight, I believe there's an error in the reference to the code regarding water. It says 12(1)(b)(9)(a), and when I look at the code, I see it as 12(1)(b)(7)(a).
I can address that, Councilmember Ward. The reason for that is that there was an ordinance passed earlier, I think this year, with code changes to Title 12. Those have not yet been codified in the municipal code that you're looking at online.
Okay. Were any of those code changes that we passed relevant to what we're doing tonight?
No.
Okay. So it's just a recodification.
What had ended up happening is that they were renumbered as a result of those prior code changes that we made earlier this year and in 2023. But substantively, there weren't changes to the code section that's relevant tonight.
Okay, thank you. I want to emphasize that our duty here tonight is to ensure that the applicant gets a fair hearing based on the evidence that's presented to us at this hearing. Our opinion on what happened during the Code Next process or anything related to Code Next, in my opinion, isn't relevant to the application that's in front of us. The question in front of us is, do we need to exercise our authority in this case to waive the requirements that are in the code and issue a variance so that these properties can be constructed? I haven't seen any evidence presented to me that presents a compelling argument against granting the variances. We've come up with a solution that involves easements and ensures access and allows development of the properties in compliance with the other relevant provisions of our code. And for that reason, I don't see any justification for a no vote personally on this tonight, regardless of whether or not I like the way these properties are being developed. I think that they're developed in compliance with our code, and our duty as quasi-judicial decision makers tonight is to allow or facilitate that by granting the variance requested.
I just want to respond to that, just with talking back to when this code came into being, there was an option to include easements right in the text itself, and there wasn't. And so I do think it is relevant to the conversation. However, I agree with you. I'm in support of the variance.
I'll make a comment that in looking at this, I did consider some prior things that the board's faced, and we're holding consistent in the sense that these properties are requiring to get separate sewer, separate water lines. We're not splitting, which is something that we resisted strongly in the past and are continuing to do here. Marjan, go ahead.
I must say that I do agree with Member Russell and Council Member that I think those decisions were made fairly quickly, and now I feel like we're kicking the can down the road and saying deal with the problem later, which we still don't know what that problem is going to be. And I think it's just getting more complex. So I totally agree with Ms. Russell about that, and I don't feel like I favor this. I just wanted to put that out.
I'll echo Councilmember Ward's comments. I'll just share, I mean, again, personal opinion, not operating as chair here. It's not for me to decide if council was hasty or incomplete in their efforts. At the end of the day, it's on the books. And Steve put it well that we owe these applicants a fair hearing under the laws as they are. And the board, the lot splitting's permissive, and the only way that it's accommodated is through the variance process, and where the board is still ensuring, if we move forward with this, the board would still be ensuring that we're not splitting water lines, we're not building on top of water lines or sewer lines. We're facilitating what council addressed when they passed that law, whether I personally like it or not. So that's just my opinion. That's my opinion as one board member, but discussion's still open. All right. I am not hearing any more, so I think we're going to move on to voting. Again, our options in front of us are to vote to approve with conditions, or deny the application. Would someone like to make a motion picking one of those three options? And I will be clear with the board and the record here. We have the option to treat one property different from another if we need to do these separately. It's my opinion that we've not had any distinguishing characteristics that would prevent us from doing this. Whatever decision we would make on one, I think would apply for all, but that is the board's discretion to handle these separately if we need to. So I will entertain a motion either for one or the group to do one of those three things.
Chair, I have a question before we go to motions, if I may. It's a process question related directly to this. So we've seen a proposal here that has a number of proposed plans, but we've also been told that those plans may change during build out. And my question is, if we just grant the approval, how much latitude are we providing for administrative approval of changes to the site plans?
So I'll chime in on that. So the way I see this is what you are granting with this variance is the ability of one parcel to cross the other with their line. And we will work with the applicant to meet the regulatory requirements for that crossing, but the variance is to allow that crossing to occur, with the condition being that it has a dedicated easement associated with it. All the details of how big that easement is, what the alignment is, all those kinds of things is what we would work through in the normal process of working through a subdivision plat or design. But what this is really narrow, to me, the narrow focus of this is allowing the variance to allow that one service to cross the other parcel. For sewer and then for water.
Okay.
So, I mean, we would potentially have the option as a board in this case to grant a conditional approval on the condition that the finalized plan comes back to us for approval.
So because these are, the properties are being subdivided, my understanding is that those plats would be being approved, I want to say it's by council or planning and zoning. There is an additional approval process that they go through outside of the design review team.
But the easement process here, like if we were to have an administrative easement granted because we said you can do it with an easement and it wasn't sufficiently wide to meet our satisfaction, at the point that we approve this variance and we don't place a condition on there, something that we are very uncomfortable with could potentially happen. That's my concern.
Yeah, so I think that's where you get into the technical nature of us looking at the specific sites. So we would look at it from an easement width perspective based on how deep the sewer is, how deep the water is, where the alignment is. Those are details of what the ultimate condition would be to satisfy the variance, which would be that this sewer line can cross this property and this water line can cross this property. The details of how that is done to meet the code requirements as it relates to that installation to our satisfaction as plan reviewers would still apply. And we would ensure through that process to ensure that met our expectations and our needs for the current owner, but also the adjacent owner.
Okay, I get what you're getting at. And as I read through the code, it does seem to comply with that. Because the portion we're being asked to waive is without crossing adjoining parcels or extending service from one parcel to another.
That's correct. Narrowly, that is what we're looking for, is that ability to cross. And when we go through that process, we will ensure that that crossing occurs in a way that protects the interests of both parties.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that extra time there.
To build off of that, can we
Peter,
set-
just to clarify something you said, is this still an accurate statement? The variances requested is to cross properties. We are saying, unless it's, I mean, we're saying it or it needs to be a given that it will be done via an easement that cannot be built upon.
That's correct. So the narrow focus is crossing the property. What we believe should provide, what we believe provides ideally the adequate comfort for the board to be able to say, yes, allow this, is that we ensure there's a dedicated easement that will not be built upon, that the one property will be able to access, and each property you'll be able to access. And so it's the narrow focus of crossing, and within that is the assurance that we will make sure that that's done via easement specific to the case of the situation and the specific designs of the particular subdivision.
I'm going to ask if any given board member besides me would like to move to recommend that the city manager or designee approve the variance request for the 5 properties listed in our hearing tonight, with the explicit statement that the crossing would be permitted via the use of easements that can't be built on. Is there someone who would like to make that motion?
Chair, I'll make that motion.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? You're free to amend the motion if you'd like to, or propose to amend the motion.
Can I ask a question, Chair?
Sure.
So if in the situation where the one applicant is intending to perhaps sell the property, there were 2 or 3 things that they would do. If the property was sold and this variance was already requested, what if the new property owner changed everything? And the easements did get built on? Or do those easements go with the property if the property's sold?
They run with the land.
Please clarify.
Oh, sorry, Chair Moore. They run with the land.
Yeah.
So if the properties were to be sold, those requirements would carry on to the buyer.
Okay.
I appreciate that question because I'll use it to clarify my point. What we're doing here is allowing the crossings. We are still ensuring we are not splitting lines, and we are still ensuring that our utilities will not be built over. That's my understanding of what this allows, and I think the city attorney just clarified. Again, these are permanent requirements onto the property that would, if this ultimately passes.
Yes.
Further discussion? Sorry, go ahead.
That would be correct, and that would be incorporated in the subdivision plans that will subsequently be recorded.
Any further discussion? All right. Hearing nothing more, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor for the motion that was just made, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
One in opposition
Nay.
that I heard. Two in opposition. I don't think I need to clarify further that the motion carries, but count. I just heard two objections and the rest in favor. All right. Moving this variance forward has been approved. Great. Thank you everyone for your time and participation on that matter. We will move on to other agenda items. I'm going to ask, recognizing what tonight is, and there's a half an hour till some other things happen. What can we do to speed through this agenda, Peter?
So,
including defer whatever we can.
So Chair, we have one item that we have to address because there's a deadline. It's associated with a PFAS settlement. The other two we can. All right. So we have two that we need to address. We think they're pretty straightforward. The other, so 6A and 6C, we need to do tonight. 6B we can defer to the next meeting, and then we can be done after that.
Okay, let's roll.
Okay. So let me get to, fortunately, I'm not presenting this, so it might actually go pretty quickly. So with us tonight is Chris Edelstein. He's our environmental compliance manager at Utilities, and he's going to talk about the PFAS settlements. There you go.
All right. Good evening, Chair and board members. We discussed an exact same item back in November of 2023. The first one was with 3M and DuPont. This is kind of the next round of lawsuits that we're bringing forward, or that we've been notified that we can join if we so wish. So these two, one is for Tyco Fire, the other one is for BASF. So since we last brought this item to you in November, in April of 2024, the final maximum contaminant levels were announced. So now I apologize, that proposed MCL should be the final MCL. So these 6 items do have an MCL on them. So the first 5 are actually analytes. The 6th one is a long formula to hopefully be below 1. So you take a look at each part of those analytes and then come up with the total. In addition, since our last time we were here to discuss this, we had to collect a sample for our unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, so the UCMR 5. That's one of our EPA requirements that we have to sample for. So with that, the results from July are now listed. All of those that we have that are part of this were less than what the MCL is going to be. So in addition to taking, and this is a finished water sample, so this is as the water is leaving the plant and going out into the distribution system. So we were below the MCLs for all of our finished water. Our raw water, we did have a couple of analytes that were elevated, still nothing that was above these, so we're still below the MCLs even for our raw water. So that is positive. Now I'm going to go to, sorry. All right, so the first one of these lawsuits is, the 2 are on Tyco and BASF, so we've already covered that. Similar to the DuPont and 3M, it's multi-district litigation. So this is coming out of South Carolina. These cases started with the city, it's a city in New Jersey. So again, it's greater than 5,000 cases for both the 3M and DuPont. We did move forward with those. We submitted our claims in July, so there's still no results back on those 2 cases. So it's going to be a little while before we hear on these 2 as well. same 6,000 to 7,000 eligible to participate. I do not know how many participated in the first two, so I can't answer that question if that comes up. So for the Tyco, they have agreed to pay $750 million total. We need to, and the reason why we had to discuss this one this evening is because we have to decide if we wanted to opt out or stay in the case by September 23rd. Both of these lawsuits came to us probably about mid-August is when we were notified of them. The final court approval is scheduled for November 1st, so that's when we would start the process to know if the courts agreed with everything. Same math and calculations as the other two, so we take a look at how much water and the concentrations of the PFAS analytes that we've had from our 2022 sampling. So there is dates of you have to sample before, so it's not going to be our most recent data that we'll submit, it's the 2022 data. Unless I can find one of the analytes that's higher than our early data, then I am free to submit that into our calculations. The second one is for BASF. They've agreed for $312.5 million. The opt-out of this one is October 15th. Again, the exact same steps as the other three. So Englewood's option, we can stay in and submit a claims, or we can opt out. If we stay in, the benefit estimated, and again, that's just me going through the calculations that they have provided, depending on the number of people that join or do not join, that number will obviously be different. So it's about $180,000 with the two of them combined. You can remember the 3M, I think, was 3.5 million. So we're kind of slowly moving down. It does not mean that another lawsuit is going to come in that isn't going to be higher. We don't know that just yet. Or we could opt out, which retains the ability for future claims against Tyco and BASF. Again, similar to the others, the potential is there for one of them to spin off their PFAS branch and then claim bankruptcy and then not pay anything additional out. So that is the potential with the opting out is by the time we were to sue them individually, they would go bankrupt and we would not have the ability to sue them, or they would not have the ability to pay. There is also, the state of Colorado did file a lawsuit in February of 22. This, with us opting out or joining, would not do anything for the lawsuit that was submitted by the state of Colorado as well. We would still be eligible for that. So our recommendation is that we remain a class member in both settlements. That way we do receive some money from the settlements. It does not waive Englewood's right to bring PFAS-related claims against any other party. So the second part of this presentation, there's still about 16 additional lawsuits that are pending that the state of Washington has started. So there's still going to be more of these coming. And again, it does not limit our ability to receive funds from the state of Colorado's lawsuit as well. With that, any questions?
Just a process question. If we wanted legal advice, would we be going into executive session? Has obviously been presented without that so far. Just want to make sure we're on just making sure that that's deliberate.
Yes, Chair Moore, that's present. Yes, it's deliberate. I mean, if there's specific questions outside of the presentation that weren't executive session, we can certainly move into that. The settlement documents are public, so that was the rationale behind the way the presentation was made tonight.
Okay. So, board, if anyone feels we need it, it's available to us. Otherwise, any questions before it will. Questions and then clarifying questions, and then we'll do a motion.
Chair, I have a question.
And further discussion. Yep, go ahead.
So the estimated dollars that come in, because potentially the cost to mitigate the issue are extreme. at least the documentation we were provided. So do those dollars just go directly into some type of fund to mitigate those expenses? Or where are those dollars going? Is it just going in the general fund for expenses? Or are we also tied to spend the money on certain expenses, remediation in general?
So those dollars would come into the Water Enterprise Fund. The timing of those dollars and the amount of those dollars in the end are unknown. Any advancements or systems that we need to install to address PFAS would likely be happening independently. And so if we do expend a significant amount of money on addressing PFAS treatment, this would likely come in after the fact to help offset whatever has already been spent. But it would go into the Water Enterprise Fund, I believe that's right, yes.
Okay, but it wouldn't, so our expenses would happen before we got any dollars, is what you're saying?
We believe that is likely what's going to occur.
So you would be spending other general fund dollars or other capital dollars, and then this would just pay back? I'm just trying to understand how the flow of funds would work on any remediation efforts.
So there are no general fund dollars involved in the water system at all. It's all enterprise funds specific to the water fund. And so if we were to be successful in a claim on this settlement for PFAS related to water treatment, that would go into the Water Enterprise Fund, which then would go into the fund balance that we'd reallocate to needs associated with the water fund. The likelihood on the timing of these lawsuits is that we will likely be moving forward with improvements that are necessary to address this before any of those lawsuits are settled. So what it really does is if we spend millions of dollars addressing this and we get a few $100,000 that come into the enterprise fund, it goes to offset what those expenses were, independent of the general fund.
Okay, I'll be curious to see what our new water plan looks like with this PFAS development. Thank you.
Let me just offer a clarifying comment there. Such funds would go into the water and sewer fund, would not earmark specifically. I would assume the board could certainly request that any settlements for that purpose get set aside and not and preserved for that purpose, but that's not where we're starting. Correct me if you think I've said anything wrong, Peter.
Yeah, I think that's right in principle. I think the way that the board interfaces with what we're spending the money on is annually with the 1 year capital, the 5 year capital, and the 10-year capital. So we'll see these things coming, not just year over year. We'll see them over the course of 5 years and 10 years. And so if we're seeing that we need to install significant improvements related to PFAS, you'll already see what those fund amounts are that are required to make those installations. When the money comes back in, it's all about timing. If the project's still going on, then that money will be there to help offset the other needed revenue. If it's after the improvements have been done, we'll put it in, and then it'll offset the revenue needs for other projects after the fact for the water fund.
I think we just wouldn't want to be in a position where we take in funds, lower rates, and then later find ourselves needing to put back in increases that for that exact same purpose.
I think our financial model and our financial plan is what allows us to not, or what causes us to not do that, because we actually have a 20-year financial model that takes into account these factors and these revenues.
Arjan?
Yes, Chair. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Peter, please correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like my research with PFAS the side effects are so extremely horrible on people. As a matter of fact, the magnitude of the problem with this contamination, there is quite a bit of cover up on it. I feel like we're going through the same thing we did with tobacco industry. You know, here's DuPont and here's tobacco industry. They're getting rid of by giving 180,000, And then here they're getting rid of your opportunity to actually be part of that data that shows that. Then we look at the cost of what it takes. I don't even think that 180,000 covers anything. Also, it just eliminate us to be part of that data that it would be present. They just eliminate us out of the formula, so therefore they can manipulate the data just like tobacco industry. Here you got the money, and now this petty money, and which doesn't even cover the cost of what's really doing to the people, and yet we're losing our opportunity. I feel like this is another scenario repeated all over again. DuPont has been doing this before, and then yet, even though it's very clear with all the regulatories that this is a substance that is extremely harmful, and yet they continuously dumping it in our systems. And as you can see it in your chart, is in everything. And yet they're going to give us $180,000 so we can walk away. I don't know how that is reasonable or very intelligent to approach to it. Unless you can see something that I don't see, please educate me. Maybe I can see your point of view of what's the benefit in this 180. Do we know how much it costs us per year, specifically to remove this? Do we know, I mean, what is this 180? Can you contribute something to this lawsuit to shows that how, I understand the regulatories, they put the standard, and if they don't like the standards, they're gonna raise it so they can fit. This is the scenario we went through with fluoride as well.
So can I jump in?
Fluoride.
Can I jump in here?
I mean, our water is so contaminated, everybody just sweep it under the rug and move on. So I just, what is your point of view? I really don't want to come, I want to see what you see there.
Okay.
Please.
So here's where, so if we think about some of the other discussions on this, and I think to put this simply, it's a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. And really what I mean by that is if we're participating in these settlements, there's more of a potential to reap some, to gain some kind of a compensation than waiting out of these settlements and then hoping that whatever entity is still around and isn't bankrupt and has money that we can then go sue for a bunch more money on our own, which will cost us a whole bunch of money. And so when you look at this from a risk and a cost and an overall approach standpoint, it's not ideal, but we're proposing what we think will ultimately result in the maximum best outcome for us based on what we foresee coming as it relates to these lawsuits. These chemicals are ubiquitous. They are in everything. They are still being produced. We work every year at the state legislature to get a ban on these chemicals, and certain industries include carve-outs every year. And so it's going to take us as a society to stop using these chemicals. They are in tens of thousands of products. They are in everyday products that we all use. So we all contribute to this challenge because we buy and use the products that have these chemicals. So why we approach it this way is because we think that this is the best way to maximize the positive result for the city based on what we know today and what we foresee the future holding.
I'm going to ask if anyone would like to move to recommend that City Council approve by resolution the City of Englewood joining two class action settlements against Tyco Fire Products and BASF Corporation regarding PFAS. Would anyone like to make that motion? Was there a second? And then we'll have further discussion.
Second.
Okay. Any comments, discussions as we deliberate the motion on the table or the motion in front of us? Okay. Well, then I will, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, no, motion carries. Do I need to, do I have the discretion to just say 6B is being moved to a later, since it's on the agenda, do I need to table it or anything, or keep me honest here for pushing it to the next meeting?
Sure. Yes, Chair Moore, you can either move to move that item to a date certain or to amend the agenda to take those matters off for this present meeting.
So I have the discretion to amend the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, I am going to have the discretion to change the agenda to push item 6B to a later meeting. Moving on to 6C, back to you, Peter.
Yes, so let me get my, okay, so this is a pretty standard process for, hold on, let me get ahead of, all right, there we go. So this is our on-call. So we have been utilizing both a combination of in-house staff and on-calls to address the needs of the water system. You can see from this graph, we experience a number of breaks throughout the system throughout the year. If you're paying attention recently, we had a stretch where we had 11 breaks we had 9 breaks in 48 hours, and we had 11 breaks over the course of 4 days, and it stretched our staff thin, and it also stretched the contractor thin. They were responding, our staff was responding all hours of the night to try to keep people in water. And so we use this blended approach of on-call contractor and staff because our system is older and has more breaks than what the industry standard is. We're continuing to work on that through the valve process, through the optimization of how we're utilizing or moving water through the system, and we anticipate over time that getting better. So how we approach that, you can see just from a standard break, it's 5 staff members. They often, for some reason, they always choose to happen after hours, and a lot of times they really choose weekends or holidays. Really like holidays too. And so it's often that we end up with people, maybe working a normal shift, and then 3 hours later, they're coming in for a 12-hour shift to work a line break. So we supplement, here you can see what, generally leads to that is our system is a lot of ductile iron pipe, and in areas it rusts and corrodes and breaks, and this is just an example of one of our breaks. And so as we experience these breaks, as we replace valves and exercise valves, we break valves and we break lines, and so we look to supplement our in-house staff with support, which is there's 3 bullets here. We are taking action. We're requesting action on the first bullet, which is to renew the contract with CNL Water Solutions. The contract amount is for $1 million. It doesn't mean that they get $1 million worth of work. It just approves for an on-call authorization up to $1 million. CNL has been actually the most responsive of our contractors when we do have issues, and they have come out and helped us in a lot of tough situations. And so we have a base agreement with them and a number of renewals. And so this would be just one of those renewals for this contract. The next 2 bullets are an additional renewal that will come later this fall. And then we're considering bringing forward another on-call with AGL, who's our contractor that's executing the lead program right now. They're doing a really great job with the lead service lines, but they're also responding to some of these breaks, since some of them are in relation to the lead program. And we think their response has been really good too. So it'd be nice to not have only one contractor, but to have a few that we can choose from when we have breaks like this. So tonight is just the CNL Water Solutions renewal. And I will, if the slide will advance, I will Well, I'm going to open it up to, see, advances too. So we're on the question slide. So any questions?
I have a question and a concern. It is an amendment in the contract. It's on page 415 of 432, and it says further amendments. The contract for service shall be subject to all provisions of applicable state and federal law, even if not specifically incorporated by reference. Moreover, any reference in the contract for service to the term illegal alien shall be replaced by the term worker without authorization. Section 31 of the contract for service, verification of compliance with CRS 8-17.5-101 et sequel regarding hiring workers without authorization is hereby stricken and shall have no force and effect. Is this the first time that this has been in one of our contracts?
So the rationale for changing the use of illegal alien to workers without authorization happened at the state level. It was mostly a nomenclature change. I am going to pull up the contract right now. I'm not sure if it's the first time it's been in one of our contracts or not.
Okay, so am I reading this wrong when it says regarding hiring of workers without authorization is hereby stricken and shall have no force and effect? Does that mean we can hire workers without authorization? Does it mean that?
Please give me a moment to pull up the contract. And you
Okay.
can just take a look at it. This is for the second renewal, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the second one.
If I may, if you need a moment, Victoria, I can get another thing taken care of.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm just trying to
Okay.
find it in the amendment here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, staff's choice, the November meeting date conflict, can we deal with that real quickly? Item 8A.
Yeah, is it November 11th?
I can take this
Holiday
one,
and
Chair.
council meeting. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So we anticipate that the November 12th Water and Sewer Board meeting will run conflict with the council meeting, assuming that City Council will not meet on Monday, November 11th, because it's Veterans Day. So just trying to anticipate not having our Water and Sewer Board meeting at the same time as City Council on that Tuesday.
I assume we can address this at the October meeting and the council members can let us know maybe their preference at that time, if the board members are okay with just 1 month notice as opposed to 2. That'd be all right? Okay, Brenda, is that okay on your end?
Yes.
Okay, great. I can do another, Victoria, if you still give me more time.
No, that's okay. Chair Moore, so I'm looking at the agenda and all I have here is the renewal. I don't have the underlying contract that's part of the agenda to verify what exactly that language is it's amending. My understanding is that we are just taking the language that previously referred to a legal alien and having the reference be workers without authorization. It looks to me that there's some additional there's an additional sentence there that might be a scrivener's error, and we can take that out so that it accurately reflects that the workers without authorization requirement is what we are enforcing.
So, I mean, my question is, if they want to change the wording, that's fine. But in most of our other contracts, it has always been illegal alien. Our contractor has to agree not to hire them.
That's right. I want to say we made that change to go from illegal alien to workers without authorization several years ago. It was within the time frame that I started with the city, so within the last 3 years. So we are, there should be contracts that the council and this members of this board have seen that have amended for these amendments where that language has been stricken and replaced by other language.
Okay, and I just want to put my concern on the record, because if we are hiring workers without verification or authorization, we are putting our water supply at risk. And I think that is very problematic.
I understand that concern. The underlying requirements for the contractor, for the employees that they are hiring, should be that they are still complying with verifying I-9s and things along those lines to ensure that the folks that are ultimately working on doing this work for the city do have the proper requirements to be employed.
So, go ahead.
Councilman Rowe, if I may, I think the board could take action, and part of the motion be include the fact that our assumption or our approval would be contingent on the city attorney verifying that authorization is still required and would fix any Scrivener errors or whatever to the contrary. Would that work for you, and would that work for the city attorney?
It worked for me.
That works for our office as well. Thank you.
Okay. May I would someone like to move to recommend that City Council approve by motion a contract for services renewal with Instaform Technologies, DBA CNL Water Solutions for emergency on-call water line valve repair replacement services, an amount not to exceed $1 million, with the understanding that the board's approval is based on the attorney clarifying language as needed such that work authorization is required. Would someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
So moved. I'll take the second.
Okay, perfect. Now, further discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I'm not going to fail to give the board members a choice to raise something if they need to. Anybody need to address anything more for tonight? Then I would, as we close, I would like to thank staff for really helping me in particular get through the public hearing process. It's been a little while since I had to do it.
Chair,
I really appreciate it. I'm glad we handled it this way too.
Chair,
I appreciate the board's patience, and to everyone, have a good evening.
Chair, if I could interrupt for just a second. Councilmember Russell did want to say something else. She's got a light on.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'll only take a second. I just wanted to bring this up. I'm not going into it. There have been some concerns, and staff is already aware of these, and they're actually working on them with the changeover in the water, and it's the water bill, the water meter. Yes. So I just wanted to address that because hopefully these will be resolved by our next meeting, right?
So we're changing the meters, we're changing the billing system, and we're instituting the lead program all at once right now. We are seeing those issues, they're dying down. However, each time we do something new, we see a little bit more of a spike of an issue. The most recent of which is the bills finally got out. They were late. We worked with our contractor for weeks to get them out. We finally got them out. We're getting some calls. We're not getting near the calls that we were. But every time we do get an issue on this, our approach is to investigate it, understand what's behind it, see if there's an error, and get back with the customer to make sure that we have looked at it and looked into it in detail. So we are working on that.
Thank you.
And Rita, I apologize for not being able to see that. All right, hearing no other objections, I'm going to adjourn. All right, good evening, everybody.
Thank you,
Good
Chair.
evening.